All right, good day, folks. Welcome to Deep Tech Gaming, where we explore the newest trends in game development through the lens of up-and-coming studios in the space. So today I am joined by Don Norbury, studio head at Shrapnel, a AAA FPS extraction game with an emphasis on digital collectibles and player ownership. Shrapnel has a heavy emphasis on user-generated content and esports-friendly gameplay, and I've been previously personally impressed by their approach to their digital economy. The rest of the team is composed mostly of other industry heavy hitters from the studio Neon, a spin-out of HBO, with long and decorated histories in game and media development. So with that, we are very excited to have Don on today to explore the Shrapnel universe and some of the very neat tech that they're building out to support it. So Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for the glowing intro.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we got it right. So a quick 30-second intro, if you could, on yourself, and then maybe a high-level intro into Shrapnel.
Yeah, for sure. I've been making AAA games for about 20 years now, everywhere from EA to LucasArts, Irrational Games, was part of Xbox for a while, and like you said, spent some time at HBO where I met all the founders that we then kind of spun out to build Neon and then start on this Shrapnel project journey. Of course, Shrapnel's a AAA extraction shooter with a heavy UGC, user-generated content toolset. Allows people to kind of put their brand and put their own vision in the Shrapnel universe. And our studio is an in-person studio in Seattle. We're about 70 people at this point, growing a little bit. Maybe not quite as fast as we were kind of in the midterms, but growing still a pretty good amount because we got a lot going on here.
Yeah, and that actually leads right into the next question, which is chat to me about, the pace of development. Where are you guys at right now in the cycle? When can we expect major updates,
Yeah, there's at least 3 or 4 different notable work streams going on. There is, of course, the game itself that people can play. And we just recently were at Consensus on the show floor. People who were there at the show could walk up and play. It was a curated version of the game that's for the show, right? It's a 10-minute thing that people can hop into. You're not getting overwhelmed with inventory, UI, and stuff like that. So it was very distilled, but it was a good moment for the game team to see that people were having kind of the response that they wanted, that the highs and the lows and the kind of arc of the game over time were actually hitting all the notes that we expect. Because when you're playing it internally, it's like familiar personalities, you're staring at the pimples all day, right? It's like you can't really trust yourself. So it was good to get to that point. Of course, that being that distilled version, we have kind of the real game as well, like our main branch that we're working on, that we're targeting toward the end of this year to have initially kind of flighting with our internal community. So that'll be like operators, SCU holders, and some of the kind of echo company. And then we'll be doing flighting rings where we expand how many people can get in towards general availability at the end of the year. And that'll have kind of the full extraction game mode and itemization in it. And then there's all the other stuff, right? So there's the UGC tools, there's marketplace, there's what we generically refer to as the ecosystem of Shrapnel. All of that stuff is actually coming online now. So our early versions of we call it the insignia tool. So it's like how do we make something very accessible for people who don't have a ton of experience making content. So we started with kind of a first principles atomic approach that we call the insignia tool, which if you've ever used Forza's livery editor, is very similar to that. It's
Nice.
kind of layered sticker sheet editing, right? And some people will put like 3 stickers in there and get something they want. And then some people do like 1,000+ layers and do stuff you did not expect them to ever be able to do. And we've already, even with our early community flighting, we've seen nutty stuff already. So who knows? Like, we're widening it now. It's going to be more and more towards general availability in the coming weeks, really. So as that comes online, everyone will be able to play with it, and then you'll be able to mint your own insignias, and then the marketplace will light up right at the same time, so people can trade stuff. And it's sort of just responsibly releasing, having like a release cadence and a release management process. We've done all of us have done this a million times. We know you can get way out over your skis if you just try to do everything all at once. Nothing works at first. It's always broken. You need the muscle, customer support channels, all that stuff. So that's kind of the pace and the approach that we're in right now. And we're doing that with our token airdrop right now as well, where people who are operators, holders, and created accounts and link their non-custodial wallets to it are going to have the Shrap token airdropped into their wallets, and they'll be able to use that to create call signs, to mint call signs, which are basically gamer tags in Shrapnel land. They're entirely ownable, so it'll be the first kind of oil in the machine of the first bits of the Shrap token itself, as well as the economy. Again, taking the cadence of steps to make sure it works properly and we're doing it responsibly. So I'm super stoked in the next few days, basically, as we start to roll that out and people start to get their hands on it and start to get feedback. Our community is awesome, so most of the feedbacks, even if things aren't working, is usually constructive. But it'll be an interesting journey. It's happening very fast and will happen with increased cadence as we approach the end of the year.
I love that you guys are doing UGC first out the gate too. Obviously, for a lot of platforms in the past, it was game first, UGC down the line, right? We've seen that, repeat itself over and over. I'm actually personally stoked to hear that the UGC experiment is going very well already. I wish that more people, particularly in Web3, would do that. But it's also understandable that UGC tools are tough. It's as you pointed out, it's a difficult UX problem to solve. It's also just a difficult technical problem to solve. Getting it into your engine and getting everything settled. So that's really neat. I think something I want to touch on too is your community size. So Shrapnel's done a phenomenal job, with both its marketing and really getting that user ownership message across. As game time approaches, and obviously don't share anything that you don't have to share, but can you give us any flavor of, what user numbers might you expect? Do you have waitlist numbers? Do you have, anything in that direction that might help?
Yeah. I mean, we have targets internally, but who knows where we're actually going to end up. From a marketing perspective, from a matchmaking perspective, really you need somewhere in the range of 10 to 20K concurrency at the minimum. That gives you a reasonable amount of matchmaking time, right? So when we talk about the initial flighting circles and getting actually meaningful feedback and incentivizing people to participate at the right time, so we can have density of people, you can water it down from how many people should come in the door to that's what we want as concurrency all the time, and you can kind of extrapolate how wide those doors need to go right from the get-go. So that that kind of gives you a target, and the matchmaking consistency is a huge piece of actually making sure people can get into sessions and play regularly. In terms of the marketing part of that, as we approach, we're very lucky to have a sizable and like I said, just a healthy community at this point, and we'll be loving all of the attention they continue giving us as more and more rolls out that they can engage with. But that's also around the time that we start ramping towards our more Web 2 style of marketing. So more traditional marketing, more familiar in our space, because ultimately Shrapnel, a huge part of what we want to do is to bring the wide gaming audience into this space, and that's things we don't use blockchain familiar verbs in the platform and game itself. It's just stuff that you can do stuff with, right? It's a familiar landscape for people. So as we get to that time frame, our traditional marketing is very heavily based on streamer and influencer, content creator marketing. So we have our head of performance marketing was a lead agent at Loaded, so they do Shroud and Myth and everything.
Yeah, yep. Nice. Yep.
So we have a whole both kind of macro big hitter, as well as hundreds of micro streamer as a strategy, and we'll be hitting that hard. We very strongly believe in social media streamer as kind of the now, where you actually get the most impact, where you attract people and can reach people where they might not know what you are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it feels organic. It feels better, right? Go straight to the people who are passionate about the game. I love that. Yeah. Taking a step away from marketing for a second and back towards gameplay. Obviously, a lot of folks who maybe watch this video are already familiar with Shrapnel. They already know what's going on. Some folks might not be. From your perspective, and maybe this has evolved over time, how would you pitch the core gameplay loop of Shrapnel? What gets you really, really excited about it? How would you get people into it?
Yeah, so we use the term high stakes treasure hunting to describe it, and a kind of like constantly escalating risk and reward trade off. So the gameplay itself, it's a shooter, but you're taking in your loadout, you're taking in stuff that represents how you want to play for that particular session, as well as just you from a personal play style, how you're most effective. And you're seeking to get in there, get some stuff, and get out. It doesn't mean anything unless you can actually get out with it. And when you go in, you're actually risking the stuff that you bring in with you to a certain degree. So there is that like high stakes side of it, which is you are coming in with something that you can lose. That said, our creative director would use the term every session tells a story, which is in extraction games, it's not like battle royale where there's only like one person or one team that wins. There's a large number of winners over the course of a session, and they're just determining how much they want to take out and how much they're willing to risk. Our sessions have a number of like extraction moments, dropship effectively extraction moments that allow you early on. There's like more seats, and as time goes on, you have a set of people who are kind of like the wolves. Who are going to stay until the end, but there's only so many seats that can actually get out on. So there's more and more contention over time. And because it's also lose your loadout, the other side of that is if I'm going in as one of those end game players, I'm going in to kill the other people who are in there and take the stuff that they've been accumulating over the course of the session as well. So it all kind of creates this crescendo towards the end of the session that is, not, it's not just the stuff, it's also there's kind of a power curve, almost like League of Legends, like intra-session power curve, where as you collect Sigma, which is one of the resources in the environment, it actually powers up your weapons and equipment. So you're more and more incentivized to be on the right side of that power curve. And the intensity, right? Like the intensity, but also like your ability to defend yourself. So it just gets kind of crazier and crazier to the end of the session. So that's kind of the arc of it. Right now, we're targeting. We're building 2 maps that we're doing a lot of playtests in right now. They range from like 20 to 40 players. And we're kind of targeting in that like 30 to 40 minute range for like the people who are into the end to end. But a lot of some people are just going to get in and play for 10 minutes and want to get out on the first drop ship. Pick around the periphery, like get in that first drop ship, get out, and like with the loot that they want. So there's a kind of a diversity of play styles that we're catering to, but that is the general feel of a session and the loop that you're going to be going through as a player.
I love that. And as a semi-competitive casual gamer myself, right? Like I will probably be staying the full time, even if I end up losing my whole loadout by the end. So I definitely appreciate that. And I think, tying this into loot, and I love that description too, by the way, of, like a risky treasure hunt, or how did you word it? There
high
was
stakes treasure hunting.
High stakes treasure hunting. I love that. I think that really captures it well. That ties into the economics of the situation, right? And obviously, being a Web3 enabled game, I assume that there will be NFT interactions, token interactions of some sort, right? Probably obfuscated to Web2 players so that they can come in nicely. But can you explain the economic loops at hand here, right? What should people be focused on? What should they be thinking about?
For sure, there's quite a few different layers, and it being a free to play game makes it so there's even more because like we always have to ensure that people can get in, experience the game at some level, and still have like a viable experience. Broadly, we separate assets between like stuff you can lose and stuff that you can't is the easiest way. The stuff you can lose is very like weapons and equipment based. It's very gameplay oriented. It's the stuff that like we are seeding into the maps, right? Or that you're like buying from us in a kind of a marketplace. It's still like everything is ownable. Everything's still like NFT based and marketplace based, and you could technically like take it to any market or another game if you wanted, depending on like the affordance for games or platforms outside of Shrapnel. But it is on the weapons and equipment. It's a little more liquid, right? It's a little more fungible. And then the stuff that's more around cosmetics, vanity, maps, prefabs, as well as a player progression system we call operators, which is a little like conflated with our operators NFT collection that we did. But it's basically your player progression, character progression. If you've ever played something like World of Tanks, it might be more familiar in that regard, whereas it's like you sort of have these characters that you're leveling up over time that unlock perks as you're like playing with them more. You can't lose these, even if you die in the session. Like you're still actually progressing them, but as you go, there's sort of these like traits that you're unlocking that are somewhat randomized, or at least like randomized within the particular like base character that you're leveling up, and these become this like longer term tradable thing as well that has a lot of value depending on which traits ended up on there and how you can like re-roll specific traits and kind of infuse one with another. So that, when we look at like the economy, it's very, as much of it is ownable as possible, but we definitely think about like protecting the we want people to always go in with their dopest shit, right? I don't want you to be like, oh, I have to hang on to this one weapon because it's so hard to get. And in one token, it's like that seems cool. It seems valuable. And there's ways we can incentivize that sort of play. We have a thing called pink slips mode where people can like put valuable things on the line, but that's not really like the default gameplay. We want people to always feel like they know the equipment that they like, and they can go like buy that from the marketplace if they lost it in the last session, or pull it out of their locker if they need to like re-equip their loadout. And that should feel very fluid and natural. And then when they're like collecting a cosmetic, a weapon skin that they stuck in towards the end of the session, we like part of what we actually seed is in that realm as well. And once you get those out, you can't lose them. So even if you have a cosmetic applied to a weapon, and if you lose that weapon, like I go in, I kill somebody who had that cosmetic. They don't lose the cosmetic. They lose the weapon. The cosmetic's still theirs. They can apply it to like any other weapon in their arsenal. So that's kind of like the top level economic loop. When you look at things that you can use Shrap for as the utility token, it's definitely, it's your ability to create stuff. Of course, it's the currency of the ecosystem. So when you are buying weapons and equipment, even buying things like consumables, it's definitely in Shrap. But really, the like, I am minting new stuff that I create is a huge part of it. It powers the marketplace as well from kind of like just a like fee structure perspective, and then it plays a huge part in our content discovery mechanism as well. So people are making maps, they're making cosmetics, they're developing themselves as creator personas, and they have these like networks of people that are building around them. You can actually you can vote with Shrap, like infuse Shrap into content you think is awesome. And then if it performs organically, so we have a performance heuristic for different types of content, like maps are the easiest example, where it's footsteps, number of times people are playing on it, so like soft voting and reputations, like stuff like that all accumulates into a performance heuristic for that piece of content. And if you were part of basically voting it into people's eyes, and so that it became popular to begin with, then everybody in that chain gets rewarded with Shrap as it continues to perform, because you're like part of the whole value chain of this like great stuff getting in front of people's faces and everybody wanting to engage with it.
That's such a unique mechanic. I really, really do like that quite a bit, Don. I'm excited to see that, come to fruition, to be honest. And I think one question I want to hammer home for folks, even though you did touch on this, and I think you actually explained it pretty well. As a free-to-play player, what will my experience be stepping in? What can I touch? What can I deal with? What can I not,
Yeah, I mean, you'll be able to, create an account. We again, catering to like wider game audience, as well as like our DGen community. You'll be able to walk in, basically create an account as in a familiar way that like any other gamer would. Download the client, jump in, shoot people in the face, loot stuff, get it out, start building your like a locker in your arsenal. All of those things are possible. There's a structure where if you're free to play effectively, if it's the first time you've played, and you're extracting stuff, or we're giving you these kind of like low tier equipment, that's not tradable in the marketplace initially. It becomes over time, as you actually are playing the sessions and actually extracting stuff. So the concept is you have to be in a position where you're risking something to be able to extract the reward for it. So if you're constantly like risking nothing, which is totally an option, right? For people who don't win much, it's definitely something where they're kind of going to bounce off of that, maybe bounce off of it. They might also want to like just buy a set of equipment that they feel like they enjoy. And we're definitely going to have like bundle packs for people as well. But if you're an entirely free player, you'll jump in and like have access to a tier of equipment. And then over time that becomes tradable effectively. So you get starts to open up the full affordances of that ownership. And then after that point, if you're like a gangbusters player, you can be in a place where you're just constantly accumulating equipment, right from the get-go. You're basically by your like second session, you're going in and extracting stuff that's immediately tradable, and then you're on the like part of the marketplace where you're providing it for the rest of the community who just wants to buy it.
I love that. And these two last questions I want to ask, and then maybe some final concluding thoughts. But you guys have so much content over there. You guys are working in so many different directions. I wanted to touch on very briefly your position in the game towards esports, and then also more specifics on the UGC stuff, because those are two very neat angles that I think Shrapnel is actually tackling pretty well. So maybe go ahead and talk through both those. So first, esports. How do you guys sit with respect to competitive play, right?
Yeah, for sure. So broadly, our approach, I always see it as you can go grassroots, or you can go extremely like high tier curated, right? The latter being probably the pinnacle example of that's Overwatch League, like right from the get go, making orgs pay millions and millions of dollars just to be part of it, right? Grassroots is like player created tournaments, allowing community members, those types of promoters and curators who just exist, and the existing networks of people to create their own sets of tournaments with their own stakes and their own rules. So we're taking that approach very much, the kind of grassroots approach, not as a hard line. It's not like the only thing that we're doing, but it seems to fit with the ethos of what we're doing at Shrapnel much better, in terms of it is a platform that's owned by the community. And if we, once we do that, the other side is very easy to fit the bill for. There's a lot when you start talking about doing things like LAN play, where from a technical perspective, we've been keeping our eye on the ball. I know when I was at Xbox, Halo made a couple very expensive development mistakes over the course of one of the Halos, where they forgot about LAN tournaments, and everything was tied to Xbox Live for a while. Yeah, as many millions of dollars were spent undoing that mistake.
I believe that. As a real OG PC player, I mean, hauling my PC a place and to play a LAN tournament and local play is, that's like a core element. I can't believe they missed that.
Yeah. It's, especially if you've got like a 5-year development cycle and different, parts of your team is churning in and out, it can get pretty easy to lose it, right? Even at a big studio, to forget that you have to do that sort of thing. And then you get a place like Microsoft, you get initiatives from above. It's everything, so, the always online at the beginning of Xbox One and like all that stuff, and the North Star gets lost sometimes. So we are definitely keeping that in mind from a technical perspective, and making sure that we can still run in that capacity. We are definitely talking with all of the orgs, not just from a kind of a tournament hosting promotional perspective, but also from they are brands who will want brand representation in a UGC tool set, and like cosmetics and customizations. So making sure they're the kind of like initial easy like white glove treatment to that process. As we get better and better and it becomes more and more self-serve, they represent kind of like a digital luxury brand to a certain degree. So on all those fronts, we definitely have friends in all the corners. We're not going to have the Overwatch League version right out of the gate of like we're going to put $50 million of just production money behind these sets of LAN tournaments we're going to have over the course of the year. We're definitely going to grow that a lot more organically.
I think the players will appreciate that, frankly. I think putting that into development probably makes more sense. And then real quick here, on UGC components, could you highlight, what you think is super fun, what people can look forward to here?
Yeah, our general kind of categories are cosmetics, prefabs, which are things that go in maps, and then maps themselves. So on the very near term, on the cosmetic side, you'll be able to play with the Insignia stuff that's going to general availability soon. That is also the basis for our skinning tool. For us, skinning is kind of an extrapolation of that Insignia and decaling process, which is, instead of just doing this in 2D, I can rotate my mesh, and it can be any mesh that we choose from the game, whether it's a static or skeletal mesh, and do kind of material expressions that are based around those decals. So you can see it's like the same idea, but now in 3D. Instead of it just being a canvas, I'm applying material expressions to something. Again, the fundamentals are simple. It might be something as simple as you having your one Insignia logo on the magazine. Some people will have thousands of layers of their actual material expressions, and you'll get crazy looking stuff. And then prefabs, I always put them in order of skins, prefabs, and maps. Maps actually are in front of prefabs from a production schedule perspective. Prefabs to us are very, I want to say risky, but it is a very responsible community member thing to approach. Initially, the prefabs for our map tool all come from us. So it's a fixed biome, it's a fixed set of map elements that you can manipulate in order to make your own maps. And then down the line, we're pulling in community members who are professional artists initially of what actual prefab ingestion looks like for maps. It'll make a lot more sense when we look at our seasonal updates, because we're also planning that. And those seasonal updates have to do with how operators and your headquarters change, but also have to do with biome shifts to a different location in the world. Yep, and you get a good color palette and lighting update, right? It's different, emotional.
I love it. I didn't realize you guys were allowing the community to make prefabs too, though. That's a really, really good idea. I love it.
Eventually, yeah. And because once you have two biomes, you're now in a position where, unless you're saying people have to use these tile sets effectively, people are going to mix and match stuff and get effects that you don't anticipate. So that's kind of the moment to be gloves are off. Now you can start making your own prefabs, and what had been very shrapnel-y will potentially have some. I don't want to say, it's not like we're making or allowing you to make Mario Kart in shrapnel, but aesthetically you'll be able to achieve different things.
I love it. Last question here for you, Don, super quick. Really do appreciate all your time today. This is a ton of fun. Folks who are trying to follow in your guys' footsteps, people who are trying to make games, Web3 games, normal games, what piece of advice would you throw out to them? Where would they get started?
For Web3 games, man, that's tricky. I would say build a really good team is the most important part, right? We lucked out hugely here on all corners of the studio. I think the timing was right, kind of coming out of that pandemic. Our Rolodexes were hot in terms of, most of us here on the game side, at least, have been making AAA games for 20 years plus. We've all shipped some of the highest rated games in the world, right? And everybody had gotten to that point where no, I want to do the next thing that is hard and risky, and people might not even understand yet. And there's a certain part in your life and career where you're either going to be really junior or really senior. The in-between's kind of where you're figuring it out, and I think we got a lot of the really senior people on that side and lucked out a lot. And then on the blockchain side, I would say, I don't want to say we started off naively, but compared to where we are now, we definitely were naive. We lucked out with a guy named Mark Mercuri, who is SVP at Consensus. He was the head of blockchain for Microsoft Azure for a while. So he kind of took our whole blockchain approach to a completely different tier architecturally. So now where we basically have our own, the same way like Epic built Unreal Engine to make Unreal Tournament, like he built a tech we call Game Bridge to make Shrapnel that just enables game development on what you get like in blockchain space, and it kind of plugs into whatever you want, right? So whatever blockchains, in our case chains that you want, like our primary like chain productions on Avalanche, on our own Avalanche subnet, but every asset we have is like completely cross chain. But also like what wallet solution do you have, what like payment processor are you using, all of that just kind of plugs into his framework. And that was completely different altitude than we were planning on doing. So but all of this is comes back to that truth, which is just if you have really good people then you're gonna make dope shit, right?
I love it. Team first, people first. Well, Don, as a final comment here, where can people follow you? Where can they follow Shrapnel? Where should they be watching?
Yeah, I mean, easiest place to follow me is on Twitter at Don Norbury. For Shrapnel, at Play Shrapnel on Twitter, and then of course our Discord. We have a lively Discord. It's getting more and more lively over time as stuff starts to roll out. So all of that you can find on our website as well, which is just at shrapnel.com.
Awesome. Well, Don, thanks a ton for coming on. This has been a bunch of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.